Should we get started? There we go. Okay, here we are. We're all ready to go. Greetings, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Greetings and a warm welcome to the final Alumni Voices webinar of the calendar year. It is an absolute delight to have you all joining us tonight. I am Dr. Piero Simone. I'm currently president of the Medical Alumni Association Board of Governors and a proud graduate of the School of Medicine class of 1995. I'm a practicing ophthalmologist specializing in cataract surgery. I am thrilled to be part of tonight's dynamic program sponsored by the Medical Alumni Association. For those of you who may not know, the Medical Alumni Association Board consists of 50 alumni and students who are fiercely committed to representing all of our alumni throughout the globe, totaling more than 26,000 alumni. Their unwavering commitment to the School of Medicine's mission and its students is truly inspiring, and we are fortunate to have them. Before I introduce our esteemed presenters, I want to take care of a few essential details about tonight's event. Your cameras and microphones are turned off. You are welcome to eat dinner, relax, sit back, and just enjoy the evening. You can submit questions using the Q&A button, and we will do our best to get as many questions as possible. We plan on having this last about an hour. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the following presenters. We have Dr. Erlene Seymour, Dr. J. Llaniguez, Dr. Jonas de Souza, and Dr. Priscila Goncalves. Dr. Erlene Seymour is a graduate of the Wayne State University School of Medicine class of 2008 and current member of the Medical Alumni Association Board of Governors, and went on to pursue a career as a malignant hematologist, finishing her internal medicine residency and hemonc fellowship at the University of Michigan, and treating patients at Karmanos Cancer Institute in Detroit as an assistant professor at Wayne State University and Karmanos Cancer Institute, studying both health outcomes research and clinical trial investigation in CLL and lymphoma from 2016 through 2021. She was recruited to Flatiron Health from 2021 to 2023 as a medical director working on data models and research using real-world evidence with industry, academic institutions, and the FDA. She then transitioned to a role in industry in 2023 and currently works at the Bigene, a global hemonc pharmaceutical company, where she works as the medical director in U.S. medical affairs. She collaborates with several departments to help guide U.S. medical strategies for lymphoma. Our next presenter will be Dr. J. Llaniguez. He earned his bachelor's degree and master's degree in mechanical engineering from UC Berkeley and MIT, respectively. His professional career then started in the automotive industry, developing engines for race cars, before pivoting to the aerospace industry, designing military drones. Wanting to work on technology that is more beneficial to society, he then made a switch to the medical device industry, working at a startup innovating new devices for cardiac rhythm management. While at this startup, he was able to interact with patients, fueling his love for medicine. He joined the MD PhD program at Wayne State School of Medicine in 2011 and finally graduated with both degrees in 2020. He now works for Edwards Life Sciences based in Irvine, California, and his current title is Director of Innovation. Our third presenter tonight, Dr. Jonas de Souza, is the Vice President of Strategy and Innovation Growth Practice at HCA. Within his functions, Jonas is responsible to identify and assess new growth opportunities and profit pools for HCA, as well as to provide strategic support to senior leaders. Prior to joining Humana, Jonas spent over 10 years in academia, and was faculty member at the University of Chicago Medical Center, providing care to cancer patients. Jonas received his medical degree in Brazil, completing his internal medicine residency at the University of Texas, then finishing his subspecialization training with a fellowship in oncology at the University of Chicago. In addition to his medical training, Jonas earned a master's degree of business administration from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Our final presenter this evening will be Dr. Priscila Goncalves. She attended the UFMG School of Medicine in Brazil and then completed her internal medicine training at Wayne State University, followed by a developmental therapeutics fellowship at Karmanos Cancer Institute in Detroit, Michigan, and a medical oncology fellowship with the National Institute of Health National Cancer Institute. She has worked as the Associate Director for Monter Health for new cancer therapies, supervising phase 1 clinical trials as principal investigator and sub-investigator. She also served as the assistant professor for Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra, Northwell Health, and is currently the medical director for Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, directing and managing successful execution of phase 1 and phase 3 clinical trials. Thank you, all of you. We know how incredibly busy all of you are with your jobs and your careers, and we want to thank you for being here tonight. We're going to start the discussion off with Dr. Seymour. Please explain to our listeners tonight, what was your career journey like switching from a traditional physician role to your current position? Give us some of the reasons why you made that transition.
So you're going to hear very different journeys between the four of us, but I will start off with mine was not planned, not at all. I did not start off in medical school thinking someday I'm going to work for industry. I thought that would be like the complete opposite. I did not know anything about real world evidence. I was quite happy at Karmanos. I was actually reaching probably about to get into the middle peak of my career at Karmanos. Really loved taking care of CLL lymphoma patients. Was really doing well with outcomes research. Still really, love all my coworkers there. I had Dr. Schiffer was my mentor. So, right before the transition, I had no idea in my mind that I was actually going to make a transition. So my opportunity came as a recruitment. Like basically Flatiron Health reached out. They had seen my CLL paper using the SEER database and was looking for a hematology medical director. I actually knew about Flatiron Health before, just because I was already into outcomes research. I was seeing these real world evidence. This is like a big database company where they get most of their data from EMR and then create these large data sets so you could perform big retrospective studies, but also prospective studies on cancer patients. And so I was curious because I already kind of knew what they were about. They were growing very fast since they're a decade. They were just a startup, and then they became a kind of a teenage biotech company. And so I took the interview as curiosity, because I wanted to see. I didn't actually commit to anything, and that's kind of how it is with interviews. You're not committing until you actually sign something. So don't be afraid to at least, if you're curious, take the interview. Why not? Or at least talk to the recruiter and learn about the position. So they needed a medical director, and they needed a hematologist to work with more hematologists in their network. It was community clinics and also academic institutions. And you would be working with engineers, you would be working with commercial folks that are trying to sell the data sets to both the EMR, but also just data sets to industry. You would also be working with the FDA. They had a research collaboration with them. So I kind of took the opportunity as complete curiosity. And then I will say that I got completely convinced by Neil Maripol. He was a GI oncologist and basically made it sound like, this is a great opportunity, and this may be your only opportunity, because I don't know that we're going to need a hematologist next year. So that was very enticing, but it was also pretty tricky to gosh, I already have a good thing going at Karmanos. What should I do? So I will say, if you ever get recruited or you have this opportunity, you do exactly what you do in medical school and tumor board and you call and you talk to some friends. And I will say, like, the first person I called is actually also in this panel was Jonas, because he made the transition to Humana. And I was like, okay, he already knows, like, he's transitioned out of not seeing patients. What is that like? And then I think Jonas, you also were a friend. We had a like a mutual friend who was also like thinking about a Flatiron job. I think it was a mentee of Dr. Maripol. So I ended up talking to her too, because she was in industry at the time. But that is the best advice, is like, if you're curious about these job roles, like talk to other people who have made that transition. What is it like? How is it different for you? What are the pros? What are the cons? There's pros and cons. They're not all pros, they're not all cons. But it's different. It's going to be different. And then you have to figure out, is the fit going to be right for you? The reason why I ended up taking that opportunity, this was right in the middle of the pandemic. And so a lot of things were changing at Carmanos, and it was one of those opportunities I just couldn't say no to at the time. So I did it. I don't regret it at all. What it's kind of like working for a company like Flatiron's, a tech company. It was like, it used to be a Google Ventures company. So most of the people I worked with were younger than me. I felt like I was old. And I was also the weirdo that was the medical doctor, but I made fast friends with engineers and commercial and marketing. And what's interesting about working for a company is that you are no longer at that some hierarchy that they teach you about in medical school. You're the doctor, there's a nurse, there's a medical assistant. You are the expert in your field, and the person across from you is the expert in their field, and you know nothing about their field. So you have to be humble really quick. Otherwise, you won't do well in these kinds of companies. It was very flexible, and unlike academics, like I don't miss like having to answer emails late into Saturday night or calling a pager. So that was a big lifestyle change for me. Um, but I still do miss patients, but I also had, my own life had changed by then. I have two young kids. I'm married to Joe Seymour. He's also a full-time doc. And so I kind of welcome the flexibility, but a lot of my colleagues that were also medical directors, some of them had part-time clinics. So they were still seeing some patients, a lot of them in the VA or just like a half-time in New York. I would say one con, depending on your role, is the amount of travel that you need to do. So that's very important. Like, is it a hybrid position where you have to move? Is it where you need to go talk to clients and you have to go to lots of conferences? They required a little bit of visit to the office in New York City. Poor me, I had to go to Soho and go see Priscilla like occasionally in New York. But that was also really fun. I actually kind of miss the cold brew in the Flatiron office. They took good care of you. But that is a con. You have some of these roles, they are like, they seem sexy because they're remote, but sometimes you do actually have to travel more than you expect, or even more so than in academics. After 2 years at Flatiron, I realized that was not my long term, but I also kind of was thinking, like, do I want to go back to academics, see patients? But I found some really good footing in and being a medical director and working with people of different functions. I really like to strategize. I really missed using my heme clinical brain, and so then it just felt like a natural transition to industry, pharmaceutical companies. So then I interviewed at several places, actually 3 pharmaceutical companies and the FDA, and then landed at BeiGene. So there I did actually very similar work as I did in Flatiron. You are the medical expert in medical affairs. You're working with medical strategy. I help review concepts that academic clinical trialists have in terms of, hey, I want to run this clinical trial. I help strategize, what kind of questions do our field medical directors or MSLs want to ask, and why? How is that tying into clinical developments plans? And then I also help with launches as well. So like we review everything that goes out publicly, whether it be ads, whether it be training. I get to still work with my friends, which I really like. I do have a lot of travel. So I go to about 6 to 8 conferences a year or internal meetings. So it does come with travel. But again, it is actually a pretty flexible schedule when I'm home. So I'll just end it there. I can answer a couple more of these other questions later, but my biggest advice in terms of transition is always phone a friend. Before I went to Beijing, I phoned Priscilla. She was already at Regeneron. And so both of these guys were really crucial in like making those transitions happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll have some time at the end to ask questions in general too, which would be great. Our next speaker, Dr. J. Llaniguez. Let's go ahead. It's
All right,
yours.
thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Seymour. So, from my quick introduction, I was already a non-traditional student. So I was always thinking, how do I make the exit out of clinical medicine and or combine my mechanical engineering, my engineering degrees into a career where I could use everything that I've learned. And so, once you guys start understanding more and more about the residency process and the application process, unfortunately for me, I chose what I wanted to apply into kind of late. And so I couldn't really pad my CV. And so I was a little bit behind thinking I wanted to do neurosurgery. And so when I didn't match into neurosurgery, I did get a preliminary position in general surgery. And it was great. It was a great way to continue my training, to enrich my understanding of the healthcare system that you don't really get as a medical student. You don't get to deal with PT, OT, social work. And so, at least doing 1 year of residency for me, I did a couple of years, it gave me a better appreciation of the entire healthcare system. And so when I didn't match for the third time, so I could talk to people, like if you ever get into that situation, I had to kind of do a gut check and figure out what I wanted to do with my degrees. And so luckily I had stayed in contact with a lot of my friends who I worked in the medical device industry. And a lot of them worked at where I currently work, Edwards Life Sciences. And so they reached out to for me on behalf of like on with HR and kind of floated my resume. And luckily I was able to get this really cool position, which is basically what I do is I work like a little startup within this large strategic company so that we get to do all the cool, interesting things, kind of brainstorm new ideas, but not have to worry about pitching to investors and not worrying about having a paycheck, this coming Friday. And so when this position came up, it was kind of a struggle for me. Do I want to continue clinical training, or do I want to make this pivot and kind of take a gamble? Because again, I had not finished my residency training, and so I thought that that would have been a disadvantage for the role. But knowing that I went through med school, I also did a PhD in biomedical engineering focused on cardiac physiology. It was a very good blend of like skill sets and what the company actually needed. And so yeah, I never was board certified, but I have a lot of training in surgeries. And so as we as a company are starting to think of other avenues on how to access and treat heart failure, my background in general surgery and in cardiac physiology is definitely beneficial. But on top of that, like Dr. Seymour mentioned, like, oh, you get to meet engineers, but I'm also an engineer. So I could also talk about the engineering side and how that might affect physiology of the patient. So when they found out like my entire kind of CV that I could bring an engineer's background, a scientist's background, and a physician's background, they thought that I was like it would be beneficial to this position. And so that takes care of the first couple of questions we have. And so what roles can physicians hold at the company where I work? I'm going to quickly share a, a slide of all of the positions that physicians can hold at the company I currently work. And as you can see, there's a quite smattering of different things that people can do. And so THV is our transcatheter heart valves. And so this is our aortic and pulmonic valves. And you can see there's anything from clinical monitoring of data all the way to medical safety officer to director of clinical and medical affairs. So that's basically writing up all of our studies and also presenting them at different meetings. TMTT is our transcatheter mitral and tricuspid therapy group. And again, very similar job descriptions there. Then we have our quality system that oversees basically quality of medical devices once they are commercialized. And then we have our corporate group. And so this is a very different group. They talk about strategy and which markets do we want to penetrate, which startup companies do we want to buy, where should we do our strategic investment worldwide. Surgical, again, we started off with surgical heart valves, and so we still have a surgical group. And then I'm in the advanced technology group where we think about all the new technologies that we want to bring to market, and anything that I do work on won't probably see the day of life for another 10 to 15 years. And I'll bring your attention to the upper left. There's Dr. Ian Cummings and Dr. Caroline Comlo. These are actually two physicians that get to join our internal incubators. And so our internal incubators are teams of 5, and one of those positions are reserved for a practicing physician. And so if you guys have questions on how do you figure out and how do you learn about possible roles in industry, I'll show a slide later that you can apply to this if you are a heart failure doctor, cardiologist, interventional cardiologist, an electrophysiologist. But this is something that we reserve for people to come in and see how industry works and how we need to partner with physicians so that we can create therapies that benefit patients. Let me go back to our questions. And so what are benefits to having additional degrees? Definitely, it lies upon where you want to go. If you want to do strategy and market development, definitely have an MBA or even an executive MBA would help. If you're more like me, who likes to do kind of the innovation and inventing things, if you have an engineering degree, that'll definitely help. But again, I remember there was one of these alumni voice meetings when I was in med school, and one of the presenters, she was I think an English major and a creative writer. And where she found herself was that she started working in Hollywood, like being a consultant for any medical shows to make sure that they got things right when they're doing, like I don't know, like Doogie Howser or whatever the current shows are. And so she found her way to get there using the degrees that she already had. And let's see, how can you get ready for a transition? So this is definitely going to be individualized kind of question, because for me, it was easier to make the jump because, with going through the MD PhD program, I didn't have as much student debt. And I didn't have to worry about a family moving across country. So I think there are a lot of different things you'll have to think about if you do make that transition. I know some people have to go through the entire residency program to earn a nice income to be able to pay for their medical student loans. So again, there's a lot of things out there, but like Dr. Seymour says, phone a friend. You have a lot of alumni that can walk you through these processes and kind of help you with your individualized needs to navigate through this process. So thanks for your time, and I will pivot it back to Dr. Simone.
Great, thank you very much. Our third speaker tonight, Dr. Jonas de Souza. Please tell us how you got to where you are.
Of course, it's a pleasure talking to all of you. So, like Priscila, I'm also from Brazil. Came to United States because I still remember my brother telling me that I should come because I needed to write the books instead of just reading the books. So I wanted to come, and I wanted to become a researcher, an oncologist. Came to Texas, did my internal medicine there, went to Chicago, did my hematology oncology there. Most of my research was related to cost of cancer care, besides doing clinical trials in head and neck cancer. Because I was doing research on the cost of cancer care, and because I was at the University of Chicago, I decided that I either needed a PhD or an MBA, still all to become a better researcher. So at that time, I decided to go to the MBA route so that I could collaborate with people from the business school. I'm going to write paper with those folks. So I went to the MBA, and I loved it. I love meeting people outside medicine. I love thinking about the business. And I think once I finished the MBA, so it was not planned that I was going to leave medicine or clinical practice. But once I finished the MBA, I started to research whether I should stay in academia, start writing the paper, keep writing the papers, keep doing research, applying for grants, or if I should go to a corporate job. At that time, I met somebody at Humana, the chief medical officer of Humana, who his speech to me was, Jonas, today you are a physician with some business acumen. come work for me and I'll make of you a business leader with clinical acumen. So I left practice, I left University of Chicago, I left academia, moved from Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky to work for Humana, a payer. And he kept his bargain. I joined the strategy team at Humana, and I was no longer a physician. I was just Jonas. I was doing corporate strategy, learning about uh, the payer side of the business. In the corporate strategy team, as Jay mentioned, was thinking about what should Humana do to grow, what business should Humana acquire, what is the long-term planning for Humana, what is the process to develop long-term planning. So it was a great experience, and I think was my, if I did my internal medicine, my residency in Houston, fellowship in Chicago, I say that Humana was my residency business. So I was able to transition from being a physician to become a business leader. And then in 2021, I was recruited to HCA. HCA is the largest hospital operator in the country. We own 186 hospitals in the United States and some in England, and all kinds of assets, urgent care centers, ambulatory surgical centers, all those things. So I came here in 2021 to think about what else can we be doing? How else can we grow? And here I do corporate strategy or corporate development, as Jay mentioned. And I'm thinking about always what market should we get in? What service line should we grow? So very business-like, and I don't use my medicine or my physician brain at all anymore. Having said that, I say that a lot of what I do is enabled by all the research that I've done, thinking like a researcher, thinking about, hey, these are the hypotheses, these are I prove or disprove my investment thesis, all those things. So it helped me a lot being a researcher and to what I do today. The drivers of the change, I would say, you got to know your motivations, and the motivations change over time. I would say that when I came to the United States, I wanted to become a famous researcher. So one way I think was ego. When I came here, right? And I think you're gonna know the motivations. It can be ego, can be make a difference at scale, can be quality of life, can be financial. I think over time in academia, I transitioned from being ego driven to be thinking more, how do I make a difference at scale? How can I work at as a physician, a lot of time I was feeling I was part of a system, but I didn't have a lot of voice. I was seeing patients, and that's all I was doing. How can I be a business leader that I can be part of the decision and help make the decisions, as opposed to just be the recipient of a lot of the decisions? I think that was my motivation back then when I started to doing my MBA. That prompted me to look at options outside practice. I think there was what is the next question here? Uh, the benefits of the MBA, I think, to me was key to get my MBA. My brother is a physician, my wife is a physician. My whole life was surrounded by physicians. It was the first time that I met people outside medicine, and it was the first time that I met people in maybe with like Jay. I thought, wow, that accountant at the same time is smarter than I am. It's the first time that I had actually exposure to folks outside medicine, and that helped me a lot to understand that uh, being a physician in Brazil or here, you got to be a lot of times one of the best in high school, really do really well in medical schools. We are used to be really book smart, but then when you go to the MBA, you see a lot of people that, wow, the person, how come the person didn't go to medical school? He's so smart. You learn that there's a whole world out there of really good people, and it was the first time that I was exposed to that. So I think was really good. When What can you do to get ready for that? I think there are a lot of, once you start thinking about it, you can be a little bit more intentional. There are a lot of programs out there that can transition you. There are some companies that offer transition programs. I'll give you examples. I think AbbVie has a program for physicians who are interested in doing research in pharma. I was part of a program at Humana. When the person took me there, he allowed me to rotate through Humana business for a year and a half so they could learn the business. I think McKinsey, a consulting company, also recruits physicians if you want to be in the consulting space. So there are a lot of programs out there to teach physicians the business. One thing that I've learned that it's way easier to teach physicians the business than it is to teach business people about medicine. So I think there's a lot of value in physicians into the business. I think it's important also to understand that the grass is not always greener on the other side. Being a physician comes with a lot of stability. You're never gonna be fired from University of Chicago. You gotta be really bad to be fired, right? You're gonna be a faculty. You're gonna do research. You're gonna be there. You're gonna see patients. You're gonna have a job. Most of the jobs that I get, that I involved in right now, I have no potential stability. Um, I may have someday a nurse leading me, or it's I got to prove myself. It's it's corporate. It's a Fortune 75 company, and I got to prove myself every day. If I don't, there'll be somebody else who's going to be better than me. They're going to put it there. The politics here are not about the paper, not about um, whether I'm going to be at ASCO next year giving a talk or not. The politics here are driven by money. If I don't have my financials right, the financials for the company right, I'm going to be replaced. So there's a lot of the grass is not always green on the other side. You got to know your motivations. You got to know what makes you happy, and once you find that, it's easier to make that transition. Um, I think that'll be my main advice is know your motivation, why you want to change, and once you do that, try to find ways to get ready for the change.
Thank you very much. Our final speaker, and then we're going to have discussion afterward. We have Dr. Priscila Goncalves. Please tell us your story.
Thank you so much. So I loved hearing about your guys' stories. I knew it's bits and bits, but it's very interesting how we end up where we are. So for me, I came to the US because I wanted to be a researcher, drug development. I always, um, as you said, Jonas, I always wanted to write the book instead of just read the book. And I thought that here I would have more opportunities. So I came to Detroit, Michigan, right? And I had my drug development fellowship with Dr. Pat LaRusso in phase 1 early phase clinical trials. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And then I decided that I needed to redo my training. I was already an oncologist, a practicing oncologist in Brazil, and I redid my training. Not fun. Try to get it right first time because you don't want to repeat your internal medicine and hem-onc for the second time. But I did that to be board certified and to really, be able to have more opportunities. And after that, that's where I started my second hem-onc fellowship at Carmanos, and then I moved to the NCI in Bethesda, Maryland. And over there at the NCI, all we do is research. So I was already hooked up on research, and I just said, this is what I want to do my whole life. And we design clinical trials. We are investigators, right? So we treat the patients, we see how the drugs work on the patients, and we develop drugs. So pretty much very exciting. Every day is a different day. Then after a few years at the NCI, I moved to New York for personal reasons, family reasons. And I worked as a director to open a phase 1 trial. Phase 1 is the very early stage of a drug development, right? And develop more studies, PIs, BIs, grants, and all of that good stuff. That was in New York. And then at some point, something I always tell my people that come to ask for career advice, I tell that, in life, you have to be happy at your work 70 to 75% of the time. If it is more than that, you're naive. You probably don't know the skeletons in the closet because there's not 100% happiness, right? That's not true. And less than that, life is short. So at that point in my life, when I was less than 70% happy in my current position. And I don't know if you as medical students, you know, there's something that's called non-compete. And non-compete pretty much says that, you know, for whatever time, usually 1 year, you cannot work in the vicinity of a place that you work. This is just to avoid people poaching, you know, patients from different institutions. So because of that, and I was in the New York area, I was looking not super close to where I was, but I still had to be somewhat around that area for family reasons. And there were two opportunities. That was right before the pandemic. One opportunity was for me to be a director of a phase 1 clinical trials unit in a university. And the other one was at Regeneron. And the reason I knew Regeneron because I was a PI. I was working with their clinical trials. So I was between these two options, one continuing academia and the other one interviewing Regeneron. And as Dr. Seymour said, you know, I was curious. So, you know, I like the people, I like the clinical trials. Let me go and interview. What do I have to lose? Nothing, right? So when I went to interview, I really started to talk to a lot of very smart people. And as you said, Jonas, wow, these people, I've been working, I had some research that I was doing for many years, and they asked me questions. I'm like, oh my God, those are very smart people. They're asking things that I haven't thought about. This is really cool. And as the interview process went along, I was at the end of the interview, I was seriously considering. I said, you know what? Maybe I'll go there and just stay for a couple of years. After my non-compete is over, I'll go back to academia, right? Then I decided to do that. And it's going to be 5 years this coming January. Never going back to academia. I'm 75% happy in my job most of the time. What do I do there? I do drug development and clinical trials, but now on this side, right, of things. So we write clinical trials, we develop protocols, we analyze data that we receive from academia. There's never a day that's the same. It's always different every day. I learn something new every day from people that have different ways of thinking, which is, and again, very smart people. And you do work as a matrix, right? You use everyone's expertise for a common goal, which is developed drug. And I feel that I make a difference. I do make a difference. We put up medicines to people to benefit cancer patients, and I am very fulfilled. Do I miss seeing patients? I thought I was going to miss seeing patients, but I don't. For me, I saw patients for a long period of time in my life. I really loved it. I was good at it. That was a part of my life. Done. I cherish. I have my thoughts, my memories. This is another one, which is also very exciting, right? Speaking about travel, it's not always necessary to travel, but sometimes it is. I love it, and I'm at the point in my life with my kids that I can travel, and this is for me is a really fun part of my job. I've been literally around the world this past 2 years, was meeting people from different places, you know, investigators from different separate countries, and again, very curious, very learning all the time. This is what fulfills me. So I really enjoy. I'm probably 80% happy on my work at this point. So still hanging around. So that's why I transitioned. I mean, I really did not think I was going to be there more. I had my mindset I was going to go back to academia, and I'm still here, and I'm not going back to academia. In industry, we can have clinical, some companies offer clinical You can have a clinic once a week or to keep seeing patients. But I have so much work and it's just so different that I elected not to do it, and I don't regret. As I said, it was different part of my life. Had that, done that, really good. Now this is a different thing and it's still very fulfilling, which for me is important, right? I want to be doing things that I think it matters in general, as a general. The pros and cons, as I said, so it can be a pro or a con if you need to travel. Depends on where in your life you are, that's possible or not possible, right? And how do you get ready for a transition? I think that as I've heard here, most of the time things it's not planned, right? I think that all of us we kind of happened to us in a way. We kept developing the curiosity, the training, the looking for different things, and then you kind of almost carve out a niche for you. And I don't think you specifically get prepared. You just finish your training, try to acquire skill sets, right? Skill sets which you can use whenever life gives an opportunity. So you have a skill set as a researcher, so you have that mentality, right? You have a skill set as maybe, I don't know, if you're an engineer, or you have a skill set as a people's person, right? You have the so-called soft skills are very important in this job. You have to be able to, lead the team, but you're not the most important person. You are part of a team. You're expert in your area, but you're not the one calling the shots. And humble, right? Because you learned and you keep learning. And one thing that I think what made me really join Regeneron was then when they told me, your job is to ask questions. We expect you to ask questions. Ask questions. And I said, okay. And then I asked my questions away, and there's a very steep learning curve, but the more you ask, the curiosity, that really is exciting. And I want to be a part of a place that, we're trying to find good treatment for people. And talk to people. You heard this from everyone. I'm not gonna keep going, talk and listen, and that's how you find these careers that are not out there, but they do exist, and there's a lot of positions. There's a lot of things you can do. They're non-traditional, quote unquote. Yeah, so that's all I have.
Thank you very much. I was expecting questions to pop up in the chat. I've written down questions that I think might be useful. So one of the questions the medical students had asked when they one of them RSVP'd for this event, and they said, well, if we want to explore these non-traditional career options, what can we do as a medical student, maybe in our 4th year? But it sounds like a lot of this kind of happened, right? It wasn't like you were preparing for this. So if a student had an early idea of going this direction, what are things that they might be able to do?
So for me, as I said, I kind of touched a little bit upon, whenever in the medical colleges, some people come to me and ask for advice, right? I said, oh, don't be fixated. I want to be a breast investigator, right? It might be what you want, but again, have a lot of mentors, a statistic mentor, someone that does research, someone that's a very good clinician, and try to broaden your skill sets. And then by doing that, you're going to open your choices. Signing up for this webinar is another one. I'm available to talk. People can reach out to me. I had many people that reach out to me via this kind of webinars from ASCO or CITSI, and we talked and try to find people that can give you the skill sets you need, and things will happen. Then you meet people, and it's a networking process. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I would say networking is really important. Actually, my first industry mentor was at like a fellow panel at University of Michigan. She also worked at Carmanos as a lymphoma doctor. Like basically, I copied her resume almost to the T. And she had worked for Pfizer for a long time and then was a consultant. So keeping, reaching out to folks, like I haven't met one person who's in a non-traditional role who hasn't talked to like at least 10 other people because somebody called them up to ask about their roles. And then there's actually there's internships and fellowships at a lot of these companies. So there may be some available for medical students, but they may even be available as soon as like high school, college level. So look and search to see if there's opportunities exist. I know like AbbVie, for instance, had like a rotation for fellows. I think there's other companies that have similar. But yes, those opportunities are there also.
Just to chime in a little bit about that, I tried to talk to our HR to see if there was an opportunity for medical students to work at Edwards, but again, because of the proprietary nature of the products that we work on, like she said, maybe not. Maybe we'd have to wait till they join the cardiovascular fellowship that I mentioned earlier. But one thing that we do is we model our approach based on the Stanford biodesign process. And so a lot of people think you can't teach innovation, but Stanford has been very successful in teaching innovation through this process. And I know a lot of other universities are starting to model their own innovation classes based on the Stanford biodesign fellowship. So if you can't give up a whole year, I know some of them do like a short 2-week kind of like boot camp of innovation. So that's another way to try to see if this is something up your alley. If you're ready, if you like innovating and like tinkering around, looking for those opportunities are definitely somewhere to go.
Very good.
I think there's a question in the chat, right?
Is there someone had mentioned the chat was not working or?
Yeah, I see your question says, are any non-clinical opportunities available for lifelong clinicians who are nearing the sunset of their careers seeing patients? I would say yes. It depends on what exactly you're looking for and what are your skill sets. As I said, again, skill sets, right? I'll give an example. We have someone in medical affairs that he joined. He's retired. He was retiring, seeing patients, but he gives because of his an expert in GYN oncology. He came in and has a role in medical affairs because we utilize his expertise of that. But of course, I think that at least for pharma, you have to have some sort of idea about the research enterprise, right? So enterprise is just not your clinical acumen is important, but you need to at least be able to understand how research is done so we can utilize that. But yes, there are non-clinical opportunities for sure.
From our standpoint at Edwards, the traditional approach was most clinicians making the pivot were already at the end of their career. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to capture early to mid-career positions so that we can develop their skill set in corporate America so that they're not like some of the stories that HR told us that we had to teach these physicians how to use Word and PowerPoint because like they've never touched a Microsoft Office product in their entire life. So there's this trade-off between where do you find somebody at the right point in their career? Like we'd like to find people earlier so that we can give them all these tools so that they don't just end up being one position, like they're not shoehorned into one position. They develop multiple skill sets throughout their career so that they can go from corporate strategy to quality to whatever. So we want to also give them as many tools as possible, not just wait till they're done practicing, doing their clinical work.
Very good. Would it be very difficult to return back to a clinical career after being gone?
I don't think so. I think that I know people that did that. As long as you keep your license active, you do and I know people that did that, but most people don't. But it's not because they cannot, it's because they don't want to.
Exactly. So I know one person, actually, Jonas, our mutual, the person that she told me to talk to went back to the VA. I was like surprised by that. But yeah, it's not for everybody. So there could be people transitioning back. With me, or just keep saying that happened, but we also, I think all four of us were like, okay, I like this about this part of my job. And then that just with every, this fits and this fits with like where my life is right now. It's almost kind of, it builds upon each other. So it kind of happens, but we define our success. Like, is this going to give me the 75% happy? And so you go through that exercise. So for me, when I was like, I got to leave Flatiron, I did not think about going back to academics. I liked the part of like working with people completely different than me, and so wanted to go into industry to be in a similar setting. So yeah, there's people that do, but it's funny that like it's not a lot of people. It's the people who like go in and transition into it, like that already have that curiosity, and then find their happiness in whatever it is in their role.
So we have a question that popped up. The question is, it sounds like there is a lot of overlap between research and industry. Are there certain features or aspects that may indicate we would succeed on a non-traditional path?
I'll take this real quick.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Dr. Seymour. Um, Industry is built on research. Everything about what we do is data driven. And so I'm also thankful that the LCME finally put in the requirements. How do you read a paper? Because before there was no discussion in med school about what's the p-value, like what are the pinnacle like research studies that tells us that we should be doing this type of medicine. And so I think like number one, like for me, like my role on the small team of 5 is that I read all the papers that came out last week, try to figure out where we need to go. I read our competitors' research papers to see, do they have a compelling device that we need to be worried about? So all of that is part and parcel to how the industry works. Everything is research driven and data driven. And to also answer Eileen's question, a lot of the things that where the industry is moving, like big things are ML, machine learning, and AI. And anything that you can do to use big data, for example, either in radiology or in dermatology, especially, how do you look at a skin issue to see if that's actually something that you would need to go see? So I see at least 2 places that they use ML, machine learning, and AI is dermatology and radiology. Sorry for jumping in, Augustine.
Oh, no worries. I was about to say, like, both Priscilla and I had like years of running clinical trials, recruiting patients on the trials, seeing how patients did on drugs. Like those are absolutely essential to our current role. So when you're a medical director, yes, I think there was like maybe a question you got earlier, Pierre. Yeah, you still need your degree. You still have to you still have to like finish medical school. I do know one person who came straight out of fellowship into industry, but I have to say, at least for my own experience for the roles that I took on, that the years that I was attending a fellow and attending at Carmelis was essential for my job. Essential. Like so basically like I just flipped around, like I was already creating these relationships with industry, whether it be medical affairs or clinical development. I'm literally just sitting on the other side. So that experience is invaluable for industry.
Yeah, it's not impossible jumping into one question, right? I know one person that came straight from medical school and is worked with us doing competitive intelligence. And he's very successful, but he's the exception, I think. Other than your experience, it carries a lot of weight. Having a fellowship and even having especially if you're doing the medical director, I'm clinical science, Erlene and Dr. Seymour is medical affairs. It really helps having the experience in the research world.
And on what they were saying, sorry, Jonas, go ahead.
No, I was just going to broaden up a little bit too in terms of know your value proposition, or what Priscila said, your skill sets. If you don't have research, maybe you have a lot of relationships with physicians. Maybe you ran your own practice before, and that is valued if you want to work with private equity. They are looking for people who can run their practices, right? So there's a lot of know your value proposition, what you can offer. it may not be all research. Of course, if you want to go into industry to do clinical trials, you're going to need research. For what I do today, I'm not sure if I need research. If you want to operate into a clinic, be an operator, be a COO, you need to know how to manage people. Know what you're good at and know your value proposition.
Yeah, to answer the question about should you forego a residency, again, it depends on what you want to do. And I know I talk a lot about innovation, and for us, like if you follow the Stanford biodesign process, you have to really understand the need that's missing. So you need to understand the patient journey. You need to understand what physicians, the current tool set that you have. And so for me, when I was interviewing for this position, I spoke to the senior vice president of advanced technology, and they said people who had not had any sort of residency, they kind of down selected, because even for going for your one intern year, you learn so much about medicine. You're drinking through like 5 fire hoses. You have to deal with all the consults. You have to deal with the patient's family. So you learn the ins and outs of medicine that you don't get as a med student. Like I think the residents do a good job in shielding us from all of that, where they just teach us medicine, so we don't get the full exposure to what happens in the hospital. So I think he said, like, even if one person did their intern year, that is so beneficial to bring to a company that's actually like working on innovation. But like Dr. De Souza says, if you're doing just analytics and you don't need to know how everything works, maybe you don't need to do a residency. So it all depends on your end goal and what kind of job you would like to have.
Great. We have 4 minutes to go. Any other questions or anything else you want to add? I think we don't have any other questions. Well, our time is up. We have just a few minutes to go. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. What an amazing webinar to hear all the different talks. Something that I guess I never really think about, that transition to a non-clinical type of career. Very important. Thank you for all that you do. Imagine we wouldn't get anywhere without your brains helping industry create all these wonderful things that we need. So thank you very much. I know how busy all of you are. So everyone, thank you for attending tonight's webinar. Please check your emails for additional webinars for the future. Just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Thank you to the Alumni Association of Wayne State Medical School, and have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Dr.
Nice
Simone,
seeing you, Erlene. Nice seeing you, Jonas. Bye.
if
See you
any
guys.
attendee would
Bye.